Well, currently the situation in the United States, as we've been hearing at this Beautiful Life Congress, is an issue really where it's life itself that's continually being attacked. And so when we consider the issues of life, we consider the fact that life, as precious as it is being looked at no longer as something valuable, something beautiful, something that should be defended. Instead, what's happened is that we look at life as something that I can choose or not choose, or an issue that I can ignore or choose to defend. But in reality, the real issue is that we must look at life as a gift of God Himself. And I think really the pro-life issue in the United States, as it is throughout the world, it's an issue that begins with faith. Because if we believe in the power and love of God, and we hold to our relationship with God and recognize that all things begin in God and end in God, and then the commandment, "You shall not kill," becomes etched within us, and it becomes a part of us, and we begin to let our decisions flow from that wonderful divine mandate. And from there, through that mandate, we learn to respond to Jesus' command that we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So if I have a genuine love of life that God Himself is the originator of, and my life flows from that act of love that God has given to me, then the words that I've heard before, which I try to pray with often, is I was made by love, for love, to love. When I allow that to happen, then the culture of life can continue to promulgate itself, and then the culture of death is seen for what it is, an attack against the very creator of life, God Himself. And so that's the first part that we must look at and understand, that in the United States, as in other parts of the world, that people are fighting for what is true, what is beautiful, what is of God. And then, from that perspective, then we move forward into the other areas. So whether we're talking about the attack against the traditional family, man for woman, woman for man, or whether we're talking about the evil of abortion or the evil of euthanasia today, and a subject that's really not spoken of too much, it's kind of implied within euthanasia, is the attack against the elderly, the violent attack against members of our society now who are aged, who are ignored, forgotten, marginalized, and so. But when we consider the beauty of life, we recognize from the natural conception, the wonderful beginning of life, to its very natural end, that we have an obligation to defend life. And so that would be the main issue I see today, is beginning with God. That when we begin with God, then our decisions flow from there. And there we can really build a culture of life. Well, the issues that we are facing within our political system in the United States is one that obviously people would look at and say, well, there are some concessions that are being made, or some concessions being offered by, whether it be the federal government or by state agencies. But when you look at the word concession, it means a compromise. But there is no compromise when it comes to life issues. There is no compromise in allowing, for example, one person's life to become more important than another, or that we may consider a lesser evil, if you will, in order to accomplish this greater work. Instead, we must try earnestly to pass policies and encourage policies, both on federal level, state level, local levels, that will uphold the true essence of life, the true beauty of life, and to protect it on every level. And so even though there may be this guise of looking at certain things as a work of charity, a work of social justice, or elements of concession, to allow those things to open or to become an open door, then in a way we actually compromise the very foundation. For example, we know that there are certain states that have passed very strong pro-life policies, and at the same time, within those pro-life policies or legislation, there is that element where that an abortion still can be performed or allowed in case of rape or incest. And of course, we hold that this is not an option, that even the life of a child conceived under those violent situations is still a life, a precious child. And so we complement, of course, legislation that is working towards this ultimate end, but we must not compromise even on that. And so even the issues that we see today being promulgated by the federal government, we must look at it through all of its spectrum, not just look at one component and think, well, this is a good thing, though it may have some goodness with it. We must look at the total picture, look at the full picture of it, and see what the full consequence will be before any decision is made, or any, quote, compromise may be made, or any concession. I would state that we should not make any concession on any level when it comes to these issues, because, again, we know what happens, that when we allow one little opening, then so much more flows through it. So, again, the pro-life fight is really a fight to its very core. It involves looking at the culture of death for what it really is, looking at every component for what it represents, and being honest and truthful in speaking in charity, always, speaking in respect, always, to all peoples, and listening to all situations, but then very strongly, very firmly, very beautifully, and always with great love, speaking the truth in those situations. And so our leadership within the church, our lay leadership, all working together can influence federal policies, state policies, local policies, and legislation that can bring a change if we work for it. And if we don't look at just ways of settling the moment or settling an issue for the moment, but look at the long term. So what do I see in the pro-life movement within the United States happening? What I see and read is that more people are becoming involved. When I travel, I see more younger people taking an active role. I see more people becoming consciously aware of the great tragedies against life. When you look at modern science today and when its ability through 3D ultrasounds and through modern sciences to be able to show people the beauty of life from its very, very moment of conception, and how life begins, and what we can do today in so many ways to protect that life and to sustain life and to promote good harmony in life, then more people are becoming involved, and they're recognizing that we must fight for life. And I think as more people take that stand, for example, Students for Life in the United States is growing. I'm watching within the Black African communities a great growth in the pro-life movement. I'm watching, older people who sometimes have, again, kind of laid back, a little more complacent, becoming more actively involved. And why? Because they see themselves as now the center of attack, where the elderly, are now being victimized by this culture of death. And so the elderly and the older people, the middle-aged people, are realizing that if we don't defend life at its moment of conception and protect it, then who's going to protect them in the latter parts of life? And so I see a great growth in the awareness, and I would compliment all those working within the pro-life movement to continue their fight, because education through the various communication media has been working. The websites, the use of the internet, the blogs, the rallies, the congresses, the various mediums that are being used today are really having a positive influence. So we need more people to become involved. We need more people to become educated. And the work of Human Life International is really an organization that exists on one of its levels, is to help bring education to the forefront, to inform people of what is happening, and not be shy of the truth, even when it is difficult, even when the remedy is hard to take.